Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of our Working for You program. I am Lesroy Williams. As usual, thank you very much for joining us for our program today. Your company is appreciated from week to week. We continue to update you with what is happening in St. Kitts and Nevis with respect to the public sector, what is happening in government, and so on. Today, we are going to be having a discussion on the protection of our children during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I have in studio with me the Acting Director of the Department of Probation and Child Protection Services, who will share with us what the department is doing to protect children and what are some of the problems that the department faces with this protection of children. Mr. Gerald Connor is the Acting Director of Probation and Child Protection Services. Mr. Connor, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Williams.
Right. Children are not the face of this pandemic, but the risk being among its biggest victims. While they have thankfully been largely spared from the direct health effects of COVID-19, at least to date, the crisis is having a profound effect on their well-being. All children of all ages and in all countries are being affected, in particular by the socioeconomic impacts, and in some cases by mitigation measures that may inadvertently do more harm than good. This is a universal crisis, and for some children, the impact will be lifelong. Moreover, the harmful effects of this pandemic will not be distributed equally. They are expected to be most damaging for children in the poorest countries and in the poorest neighborhoods, and for those in already disadvantaged or vulnerable situations. We have to protect our children, especially during this pandemic. Here in St. Kitts and Nevis, of course, like everywhere in the world, children are vulnerable. And in the case of the COVID-19 virus, because here in the Federation, children cannot be vaccinated. Under 18 cannot be vaccinated. They are unprotected. They are vulnerable to the COVID-19 virus. Therefore, our society will be judged. The moral fabric of our society will be judged on how we have protected, that is, us adults, have protected the most vulnerable, the unprotected among us, which is our children. Parents have an ethical and moral responsibility to be vaccinated, to protect their children. Our adults in society have a moral and ethical responsibility to protect those among us who are most vulnerable, who are most unprotected. And our society will be judged on this. It is a serious responsibility that we have. Our children are vulnerable. Our children must be protected. Mr. Connor, the Department of Probation and Child Protection Services deals with two things. There are two things there. One is probation, one is child protection. Can you distinguish between both, the probation aspect and the child protection services aspect?
Good afternoon, everyone out there. Thank you for having me again, Mr. Williams. It's always a pleasure being here, where we can share whatever information and bring the nation up to speed in what's going on, and ensuring that everyone have the information to be guided by, and ensuring that the department is functioning the way it's supposed to, especially in these trying times. So as it relates to the Department of Probation and Child Protection Services, as you stated, there are two different units within that department. You have the child protection end of that unit that deals with children who are vulnerable, children who are being abused, children who are being disenfranchised in a way that would cause whatever type of abuse, mental, physical. And then you have the probation department that deals with children who are in conflict with the law, and also children who we will deem to be might head down the wrong road, vulnerable in that aspect of committing an offense, getting in trouble, going down the wrong path, following the wrong company, and stuff of that nature. So our department operates in a twofold, and it's basically, when it comes around to children, we are at the tip of the spear to ensure that all situations that deals with children are carried out in the best interest of every child within the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Now, a child, for definition purposes, Mr. Connor, is defined as anyone under the age of 18?
Under the age of 18. Bearing in mind that you have a young child, you have adolescents, you have young adults, persons who are going into, well, preteens, and then you have persons who are going to adulthood, such as persons who are 17 and 18 who are making that transition into being responsible for their own life, for their own decisions, and stuff of that nature. So, yes, anyone under the age of 18 and down, but yet we still have a different barrier for persons within different age range of that aspect that we will look at as even being more vulnerable as they progress through their stages in life.
Now, Mr. Connor, you have a national child protection protocol policy. Could you tell us a little bit in terms of this national child protection policy?
It is very important that we have a national child protection protocol policy. Very, very important. Basically, where we're at with this is that it have been already been to cabinet. They have been accepted in principle. Presently, we are still speaking with other entities to make sure that everyone have an understanding and a common knowledge of what their role and responsibilities will be once this policy, this protocol have been adopted and ready to move forward and put into operation. So the National Child Protection Protocol is basically a document that outlines the roles and objectives of each institution and profession that come into contact with children. The protocol basically provides for the minimum standards for prevention, investigation, reporting, judicial intervention, care, treatment, and support of each case of child abuse and neglect. The protocol is basically guided by the Child Welfare Act and the Child Care and Adoption Act. That is what basically gives my department and also the Child Welfare Board its authority to ensure that children are being dealt with in a particular way in every fabric of our society. So the goals of this act is there the goal of the protocol is for the prevention, reporting, investigation, management of child abuse in the Federation. It is also designed to do all that is necessary and reasonable to protect children against harm and to prevent child abuse and neglect. So you have what we call within this act mandated reporters. Mandated reporters such as, of course, persons who work in my department, persons who work in various government ministries, such as social development, the counseling unit, police, of course, fire services, the defense force, nurses, clergy, all of those persons who would come into contact with children and would help or aid in the investigation of in any particular way of reported cases. So it gives directions to each and every one of these agencies and professions which is involved in child abuse cases.
Right. Now, Mr. Connor, today parents have a huge responsibility in the prevention of child abuse and neglect. It is a parent's responsibility to prevent child abuse and to prevent neglect. However, sometimes the parents and guardians are the inflictors of child abuse and child neglect. What role do parents play in the prevention of child abuse and neglect?
Especially in this vulnerable time. Parents have to ensure that they carry out their role and responsibility hard and fast. This is where, of course, we all know that school was closed very early. Persons were still going out to work and leaving their children out there to, basically look after themselves. Because at the end of the day, based upon what is going on economically, persons have to work to put food on their table. Now, parents need to be mindful that they still bear responsibility to ensure that their children are protected. So, the responsibility is very, very hard at this point in time. So, parents need to ensure that they have a very, very good relationship with their children. Open line of communication is very important when it comes around to rearing children in this day and age. You have technology that are there. You have different methods that you can use. Of course, we look at giving cell phones to children and, stuff of that nature. But we must also understand that when it comes around to electronic gadgets, we must be mindful of how children use those electronic gadgets and who they interact with on these electronic gadgets. Do they have a Facebook page? We must be mindful of that. We must be mindful of also Instagram, Snapchat, things that they would be basically lured to, as we would say, to kill time, pass time when they're at home. Also ensuring that their educational aspect is being looked at, because you have online schooling at this point in time. So making sure that your child is attending classes online is very, very important. And that is why it's so important to have those safety nets, those persons around that would ensure that your child is not going down the wrong road. But we also must be mindful of persons who we allow to be around our children. Persons have ulterior motives, so you have to ensure that that line of communication, that comfort level is there with your child. You must always ensure that you know where your child is going, who they're associating with. Do not wait until it's too late to even report. If you see something suspicious or you suspect something suspicious. And that is why it's important to have open dialogue with your children. Know your child. Know your child. I would understand that, when persons leave to go to work at early hours in the morning, return late in the evening, and you're tired. But at the end of the day, it is your responsibility to ensure that whatever measures that you put in place, those measures will work within the best interest of your household and the best interest of your child in the long run of it.
Mr. Connor, you mentioned the online learning, you mentioned education, and that brings out what has happened during this pandemic, that the learning crisis has increased because, of course, of school closures. The United Nations said that 188 countries have imposed countrywide school closures, affecting more than 1.5 billion children and youth. The potential losses that may accrue in learning for today's young generation and for the development of their human capital are hard to fathom. And children, one of the ways that they have been affected is the disruption in their education. Not only that, going online, children like to be out and about. They like to meet with their friends. They like to play. That social component is extremely important to their development. And yet that has been disrupted in many ways. And on top of that, the online learning. Parents have additional responsibilities. And parents might be challenged in several ways. They are not very competent with the technology and all of that to help their children at home with the online learning. Mind you, a number of children are very adept with the technology, and surprisingly, all the things that they can do with the technology. But nonetheless, it is not the same. And children have to be supported during this time, away from the physical schooling. And sometimes parents are just not up to the challenge of offering that support. They sometimes have been mentally challenged. Maybe they have lost their jobs. They have been economically challenged. And so sometimes that can bring more frustration than anything else, and that frustration can be taken out on the child. What do you say?
And that is what we have to be mindful of, because the socialization aspect of children are very, very important. So socializing within the school, within different youth groups, different programs that children would normally attend, is going to definitely cause a big developmental gap within children going forward. And we need to be mindful that it's going to pose some challenges. We tend to want to ensure that children are well-rounded. Children are well-rounded. They're exposed to various things that would help to develop them mentally, cognitively, all of that. And we have to make sure that we continue to engage them on various platforms to ensure that those skills that are very important are not lost. Also, we must be able to give support to their parents. As you mentioned, there is that gap, that parents, the technology gap, where it's online schooling. A lot of parents who didn't come up with that kind of training within computers. Probably they just know how to send a WhatsApp or a text or answer a call, and they're not au fait to certain things. And it brings real vulnerability within the household. And it is very important for parents to open up their mind to the new level of thinking that is going on, and the new approach and the new dynamics to how education is being looked at. As I did mention earlier, when it comes around to homeschooling, it is very important. We have seen many things over the world where you have children who are taking the mannequins and putting them in the seat, in their chair, to sit down with a wig on and a mask on, and teachers are like, well, you really showed up to class. And these are things that we must be mindful of, that children are going to, this is something new to them. They want to go outside to play, they want to go outside to interact, but bear in mind we still have this 6 feet social distancing, and then you have now this new wave and new community outbreak that is going on, and the children wanting to have that kind of experience, wanting to keep that kind of personal relationship with their friends and their neighbors, might get exposed to that. So communicating with them is very important and letting them understand that, hey, you cannot do the things that you're accustomed to. And you have to be able to have that kind of conversation with your children for them to understand the importance of social distancing, wearing your mask, making sure that you attend your online classes when you have to, making sure that you keep up with the stuff that you still have to do to ensure that you achieve what you need to achieve. So parents have it really, really hard, and it's very, very difficult at this point in time. And you know, I would definitely like to see a lot of the employees come on board to support some of these persons who work in the institutions and franchises, to give that level of comfort to these individuals, probably even helping them to pay for online tutoring, because at the end of the day, this is our future. And and because of this pandemic, we're going to be set back a few years, definitely. We're going to be set back a few years. That is the reality of it. The things that we were exposed to help to develop us children will have to be playing catch up. And parents will have to start catching up. So the whole mental health situation comes into play, because persons are at home, they're making less money, they're trying to catch up with their bills, they're trying to make sure that food is on the table for their children, and parents need to come together collectively, fathers, mothers, you know, come together collectively to realize that if they do not create that bridge, that at the end of the day, their children are going to suffer. And the country is going to suffer in the future when it comes around to the development of our society and the setbacks that we are facing right now.
Mr. Connor, we realized just over the past few weeks the challenges that children face, especially with this pandemic. You had children in primary schools who, because of the spread of the virus, their schools had to close, they had to be tested, they had to go home, and all of this disruption, and perhaps trying to understand what is really happening around them, what it all means. It could be a very traumatizing thing for our children. Their mental well-being, their social well-being have been affected. And they need some sort of a psychosocial support. And in many times, their problems are manifested in they're probably depressed and other things, and parents are not always equipped to deal with such cases. Now, your department, of course, has to do with child protection services and so on. You know, what type of service do you offer at the department? Or can it be reported that this child needs this service, support services for children, especially at this time? And additionally, we speak about the disruption in education, but the lockdowns and the shelter-in-place measures come with heightened risk of children witnessing or suffering violence and abuse, especially if they're already in homes that are violence infested, abuse infested. And additionally, going online on these online platforms, children are at an increased risk of being exposed to inappropriate material and perhaps even predators. What will you say to that?
We work closely with a number of different government agencies, namely the counseling unit. We work closely with the National Drug Council. We also work closely with the Ministry of Education, who have guidance counselors within the school systems. And we do that to ensure that children have wraparound services. Not just the children, but their families needing that wraparound service, to ensure that all facets of their lives are being looked at, to ensure that they understand the situation that is happening. And I would encourage the different government entities to also start doing work within the educational system to ensure that children are understanding what is going on. I know that some schools are doing online classes, and even to have the guidance counselor to have a session with the entire school or with the teachers who are even experiencing these traumatic situations, because they themselves are trying to figure out how they're going to be shifting from being in the classroom to becoming virtual. Mm-hmm. So, the education department, have that put in place, built into the whole online training platform that would have guidance counselors, the counselors from counseling unit, persons from the Family Matters program, to do sessions online with various schools to engage these teachers and engage these parents in that regard, and having open dialogue and open discussion to prepare them to be able to take on those challenges. Because when we do start getting back to the norm, as we all hoping to get back to the norm, you now have to re-engage these children within the classroom setting, and they're going to come with certain behavior that are going to be changing the dynamics of the classroom. Because this is really going to change the dynamics of how we do things. So, violence and abuse within the home also, and that is something that we cannot hide within our society. That children are exposed to these things within the Child Care and Adoption Act, and I would even say this, that there are laws that are out there that protects children from these things, which states basically that if a child is exposed to domestic abuse, the child can report and the department intervene, the police can intervene, because once you expose a child to this type of behavior and lifestyle, it damages the child emotionally and mentally. So, and that is why it's important to have mandated reporters, people understanding that when you see these things happening, your job is to actually report these things. A child might be going through a traumatic experience because daddy and mommy are basically stuck in the household, or their mother have their boyfriend living there and they're having an abusive relationship and stuff of that nature, and children are feeling vulnerable, like they do not have anyone to speak to, or I don't want to go and tell my mother and she boyfriend, or my mother and my father, because I don't want to break up my household. So this is why it's important for children to understand what is abuse also, and we need to start teaching our children these things at a very, very early age, that they would be able to recognize when something is not right, and knowing who are the appropriate persons to go and speak to, and put it out there that they can bring help that is needed as much as possible to their home and to their life, to bring stability. And I'm not going to speak for gender affairs, but this is something we actually had in an online forum the other day with Legal Aid and SVU and Gender Affairs, where we looked at the various issues that have been coming out from the first lockdown that we had. We need to look at what transpired to learn from that, so we would understand how to go about dealing with these things, just in case we will go back to that point again. Making sure that the systems are in place, persons are be able to access the services that are needed during those period in time, and ensuring that families are properly equipped to make it through those periods. Right now, of course, we know that some persons are out of work, persons are at home, and these are things that are going to manifest themselves, and persons need to understand how to deal with it. So we have open line of communication with our partners within different agencies. The department, yes, we are working on reduced hours, physical hours, from 8 to 2, but we have information. I will give you that information before we wrap up, in terms of phone numbers and email addresses and stuff of that. Most of the officers are working from home, but they have full access to being able to respond to cases of that sort.
Mr. Fowler, what were some of the specific findings? You said that you had some sort of a coming together, gender affairs, yes, and other related, your department and other, yeah, related organizations and so on. And coming out of last year,
yes,
when the pandemic really, yes, hit us here, and you know, what have been some of the findings in terms of what has taken place in terms of people's mental health, social health, economic health, and the impacts of these on people? How people have been traumatized, how people have been scarred, yes, and so on. Now, of course, the director of the Department of Gender Affairs was here. One of the things that came out is that they said that domestic violence had spiked.
Yes.
During the lockdowns and during the stay in place orders and all of that sort of a thing. But that is one thing, that the domestic violence spiked. But at the very same time, when you have children in those households, yes, in the mix, as you put it, and witnessing all of that, what is the toll on the child?
We find a lot of issues that played out from the first lockdown was lack of co-parenting. We have a society that does not understand, parents that does not understand how to co-parent. And that is one of the biggest challenges that we're facing. Also, playing out of that was the whole economic situation where daddy lost his job. He can no longer afford to do this and do that. He can no longer afford to help to pay the rent because he probably work in construction. He probably work in one of those vulnerable areas that took one of the hardest blow. Yes. And therefore he can no longer sustain the family. So you will find that in order to continue that whole family process, that household process, persons having to find other means of getting support to facilitate their household continuation. So you find that relationship got broken up. Persons were having to abandon their families for some reasons or the next. You had issues within co-parenting. You had persons where were just constant argument and constant fighting, and the children are caught in the middle. And some of these most vulnerable persons that were caught in the middle are children who are still living at home, are of 16 years of age, experiencing, they no longer, they cannot, mommy and daddy cannot help them anymore because the funds have dried out. And you will find that predators, grooming began,
yes,
by older males. And even within the aspect of young males.
Yes.
Because they have to maintain themselves. So you will find that these were some of the challenges. I'm going to say this, we had, I believe, coming out of that, we had, I believe it was 2-3 cases where some young males were actually being coaxed online by males, by older males, to come and meet with them, and these are the reality of the situation, where we find that not just preying on the young females, but also preying on the young males, in order to based upon their vulnerability of the pandemic and the whole lockdown and stuff of that nature. So we have to be careful of how we do things within our household. We have to be careful. So you'll find that domestic violence spiked. You'll find that depression of persons who can no longer facilitate their families in a particular way. Economic downturn, where you can no longer afford to buy this. Some persons couldn't even buy sugar, milk, stuff of that thing. So these are things where the social safety nets now have to come into play. We have to make sure that we strengthen of our social safety nets to absorb a lot of things that are going to be playing out during this whole...
Especially the most vulnerable.
The most vulnerable.
And those who in many ways are marginalized in our society. Now, the United Nations, Mr. Connor, said, I'm quoting a lot from them in a document, that the ultimate impact of the crisis on children hinges on how much time it will take for the pandemic to end. The longer the pandemic goes on, is the longer that children will suffer the effects of all that is taking place. It says a longer struggle to contain the virus not only prolongs the pain caused by the pandemic, but raises the prospect that the pandemic's impact will have lingering or persistent effects on children. He says the longer schools remain closed, the less likely children are to catch up on learning and essential life skills that support a healthy transition to adulthood. So somehow their development is being affected.
Will be affected.
Will be affected and is being affected. The other thing that, you know, so therefore, one of the ways that they're saying is that the longer that immunization campaigns are suspended, is that the longer the pandemic will go on.
Yes.
And so therefore, the more that people get immunized, that will bring an end to the pandemic, and it will help our children get back to normal, get back to school, get back to the things that they love doing.
Team sports.
The team sports, and
which are very, very important.
Which are very, very important. And the longer we suspend being vaccinated and doing what we have to do to protect our children, the more severe the impacts on them will be, and their development will be retarded in many ways.
We definitely need to ensure that we get vaccinated. I'm not a health professional, but
neither am I.
From looking at what I have read, what I understand, being vaccinated, having a level of immunity to anything is very important. It's very, very important. It's not saying that you will not get the COVID, but it would lessen the chance of you getting it to a severe state that you will die. So it helps to protect, or even over the period of time where you will suffer, symptoms will be shortened. And it will help to go back to the norm of reopening of schools full time, getting persons back out there to work. Also bearing in mind that we still have to keep to some of the COVID protocols of sanitizing, wearing your mask, making sure you try to distance yourself as much as possible in certain situations, and getting things back to that norm is very, very important, because at the end of the day, our children are the ones who are going to suffer. Fortunately, we haven't had any deaths, and you know, I am so grateful for that, because at the end of it, you do not want children to become fatherless and motherless. You don't want children to experience the loss of a loved one. So if getting vaccinated is going to lessen that risk, that is what we need to look at and get moving on. I'm going to say this, I'm fully vaccinated. I'm fully vaccinated. One of the things that hit me was when my son and his mother ended up in isolation because his sister attended one of the schools, and having to go and deliver stuff to him and having to stay outside for her to come and collect it, and not even able to look at him and say, well, hey, what's going on? It affected me, and I'm saying to myself, hey, what if? And these are things that we need to be mindful of. This separation of families, because you have to go into isolation, plays a vital, it is going to traumatize children. Having to see their parents go into isolation. I heard of cases where persons had to actually just look through a glass and watch their loved ones die because they could not have that personal interaction with them. So we need to, and it's a decision that you have to make. But you have to know, you have to understand on what premise you're going to make that decision of being vaccinated or not being vaccinated. And it's up to us as adults to do the right thing that would ensure that getting back to the normal state of affairs, to ensure that our children fully develop. Because we like to say, oh, I did this when I was young, I did that when I was young. But look at the children them today. So we need to ensure that we continue to move in a progressive manner. So if vaccinated is the way to ensure that it lessens the chances of death or severe medical issue, I am saying that persons need to ensure that that is what they need to do.
Yes. Now the vaccine that we have cannot be administered to children under 18. Yeah. And that is because the trials were not done on persons under 18 years old. Ordinarily, children have taken vaccines and have taken many vaccines and at early age and have been protected. In this case, in this country, where we are using the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, children cannot be vaccinated. So let's face it, they cannot be vaccinated, and so therefore it would take the vaccinated to protect these children who are...
To create that bridge.
To create that bridge. To create those children, to protect and to safeguard those children who cannot be vaccinated. And so therefore, in a certain sense, we adults are the vaccine for these children. What do I mean by that? We are the ones that will protect them from getting sick. We are the vaccine for our children. The adults, all the 18-year-olds and over, are the vaccine for our children. And we have to understand that. If we love our children, then we have to understand that. If we care about our children, if we want to protect them, we have to understand that. And that is one of the issues, I think, that children are faced with today. I mean, there are several issues, we're discussing them here, but that is one of the issues. The other one, of course, is disruption in their school life, brought on by the pandemic, and all that they're going through. You mentioned the isolation. The isolation, and basically the toll that isolation takes on children.
Being locked away is not a good feeling.
Being locked away. Wanting to go out and to play with your friends. and really can't play with your friends. You know, one of the things that has increased, I read, in certain countries, with all these lockdowns and so on, sometimes you have teenage pregnancies.
Yes. And that is something that definitely we need to look at.
Especially if you lock down a teenage girl locked down in a house. Of course, she lives in a house where the man is not her father.
Yes.
He's a stepfather and all that sort of a thing.
And at the end of the day, we that is why we say that the parents are the persons who bear all of the responsibility when it comes around to the protection of children from that end. That you must be able to instill in your children, have open conversation with them, have dialogue with them, especially the coming into their preteens and going into adulthood. That yes, the age of consent is 16 years old, but at the end of the day, we still must look at ensuring that children are given that chance, that opportunity to progress, because your parents is still responsible for you until you're 18.
Yes.
Still responsible for you until you're 18. And some of the cases that we have been dealing with over the past couple months, so far we have had, to be correct, I believe it was, give me 1 second here. For the year so far, we have had 68 reported cases of child abuse and neglect already for the year. And of course, some custody matters within there. But 68 cases during this time is a very, very high number. This includes teenage pregnancy. This includes sexual offenses that have been reported against minors and stuff of that nature. So you could see that there is definitely a case we made when it comes around to ensuring that persons understand that children need to be protected, and the social safety nets need to ensure that what is done to protect these children is first and foremost. And that is why this document is very important, that all entities need to understand what role they play, especially in this vulnerable time. What is as it really, and even in regards to reporting, for you as a mandated reporter who knows of such and failing to report, you can get up to 12 months in prison once that can be proven that you fail to report such. So it is very important that we understand the context in which we operate within the community and within the federation and within the lives of the vulnerable ones within our society at this point in time in our history. So we all have a part to play in this whole thing. And parents need to understand that, yes, you have trying time, but you cannot neglect your parental responsibility.
Mr. Connor, what services or support does the department offer for parents and guardians who are mentally challenged and economically challenged? Because if parents are challenged in these ways and parents have issues in terms of their mental health and economics and so on, that in some ways has an adverse or can have an adverse impact upon the children.
Yes.
Because many, let's face it, many parents didn't go to any sort of a parenting school.
None of us was born with a manual.
A number of them do not have the skills, because sometimes parents very young do not know how to go about parenting and so on, and they make a number of mistakes.
Yes.
and so on, and they may need some sort of help.
Yes. Okay. Whenever we get a case that is reported, we look at the entirety of what have been reported. We ascertain whether or not the report is true or false. And then we still go in depth to find out if the family is vulnerable in various areas, such as economic vulnerability, one of the parents have a mental issue, they're having various issues within the home setting. So then now what we do is that we make referral to different entities. So we work closely with the counseling unit. We work closely with social assistants who have now moved down to the Dr. Williams, the Calvary school uniform program. Also make referral to the PAP if necessary. And we have also, we even do emergency placements if need to. If we realize that probably the parent need a break from within the home, need a break from the children within the home to just get rid of some of the stressors. So we can do emergency placements to alleviate some of those pressures that are being placed on parents. We also look at doing emergency food vouchers if we have to from our end. That would help to bring some sort of assistance right there and then to these families. So that is things that we have been doing. We also make referral to various entities. We have even made referral because sometimes we might visit a home and we realize, well, this family is living in a very a home that is just not conducive. Probably you have leakage in the roof, you have a window that needs fixing, and we will make referral to public works for them to come in and help. We will make referral to NHC and stuff like that if we realize that this family is in need of proper housing. And these are things that we as a department have done in coordination with other government entities that are out there. So we look at the bigger picture of not just what have been reported, but what our investigation have also determined that would be causative factors to making this family dysfunctional and making the environment non-conducive for these children.
Right. So there are specific protection for vulnerable children.
Yes.
And you have the child-centered services,
yes,
which you mentioned, but
and of course not to forget school meal is very, very important.
Nutrition.
Yes, the nutrition, because what we find out is sometimes these children go to school and do not have anything to eat. So we work closely with the school meal program to ensure that through the school these children named are placed on a list. And we need to move away from the stigma of this school meal program that children have, that this food is not good. We had some good school meal down when we was down at the NOC during the lockdown, and trust me, it is very nutritious.
Which is probably what we are told.
That was exactly. So the stigma need to be taken off of those social safety nets, and people need to understand that these are things that have been put in place, and you need to take full advantage of these situations. Because digging into your pocket every morning to give your child $10, $20 for school when you are already vulnerable.
And what has, protecting the child during this pandemic, because this pandemic has brought about additional hardships, and so therefore parents may not be able to afford even to buy food the way that they used to buy food and to support their children economically. And so therefore the school meals
is very important.
Is even much more important because of what is being faced by the pandemic. Some parents may have lost their jobs.
Yes.
And they're not able to support their children economically. And that can be something very frustrating and even mentally challenging for the parents. Now, Mr. Connor, the children act out. And very often, when you see children acting out in particular ways, violently, or join in gangs, become very sexually active at an extremely young age, promiscuous, soliciting favors from older men. Usually it's older men. And some of these things that you see, deviant behavior. How does the department deal with that? You have youth offenders. How do you deal with that? Because that seems to be an area now that requires, special services in terms of how do you reconstruct that child?
Yes.
How do you rehabilitate that child? How do you help to make that child whole again? Because that child has been broken. And because the child is broken, the child is not healed, the child is acting out in ways that are not healthy.
I'm going to say this. Within the Caribbean, we find ourselves behind with a lot of these, dealing with a lot of these issues. We were not prepared in a particular way to see these issues at a very early stage and start dealing with it. Even when you look at the amount of professionals we have within this field, it's very, very limited. You will find persons going off to study to be doctors, lawyers, accountants, business administrators. But when it comes around to persons understanding that the need for social scientists within the region and within St. Kitts is very, very much needed. Psychotherapists, psychologists,
psychiatrists,
social workers. We are in need of them. Criminal justice persons, we are in dire need of them because our children are crying out. Our children are going through a serious situation, and we do not have the persons with the particular skill sets to really deal with a lot of these challenges that we're facing. So when it comes around to juvenile justice, there's the Child Justice Act, which basically speaks to diversion, diverting children away from the court system, having them being dealt with in a more therapeutic way, getting programs that would be able to socialize them differently to what they see on TV, what they're experiencing within the various community, having them realize that there's something different out there than what you see or what you live in your reality. And it's very important for us to have programs that are workable, programs that have longevity to it, clear objectives of meeting the demands of these vulnerable children who comes into these programs and cater to their needs and well-beings. Programs that are going to reprogram the minds of these individuals is very important. So you have the child justice system where, as I said, we look at diversion. So a child commits an offense. It's not every offense that a child commits, the child will be diverted away from the court system, because of course there is some offenses that are very, very serious that you cannot just divert. So for example, a situation where a child is following the wrong company. Probably you might have a bunch of youngsters within the community who hang out together, and one of them throw a stone and hit a car. How do you deal with that? Do you drag that child to the whole criminal justice system? Do you drag them to the whole system? But if we could identify programs within those respective communities and persons within those respective communities who are willing to become mentors to these children, it's very important. Very, very important. We find that a lot of people have taken a backseat in dealing with a lot of things within various communities. Persons have said, I ain't dealing with that. I ain't getting paid for that. I ain't wasting my time on that. And that is something that we as a society need to move away from. That is something that we have adopted, and it is not right. We have to remember that the motto of the country is country above self. And that speaks in volume. That at this point in time, going through this situation, going through this pandemic, is where country above self need to be presented more at the forefront.
Yeah, Mr. Connor, going back again to the youth delinquency,
Yes.
Deviant behavior among our youth, them acting out in many
ways,
unhealthy ways. There's a breakdown in values.
Yes.
But a lot of it goes back to child rearing and how that child has been socialized. So again, it goes back to the home.
Mm-hmm.
And if a child is raised in a healthy environment or an unhealthy environment, and it goes right back to the theme of that of protecting our children.
Yes.
We have to protect our children from all the negative influences
at a very early age.
At a very early age, so that they will develop holistically, so that they will not have problems in which brings them to a point of delinquency. And acting out and looking for acceptance elsewhere, even in terms of gangs. The problem today, if you will agree with me, is that sometimes parents do not have time to spend with their children.
Time is
so therefore the children lack supervision.
Yes.
Because the parent might have 1 or 2 jobs, or the parent might be too busy out partying, because we have now a lot of young parents, and sometimes they are teenagers themselves, and they're still living their lives out partying, and it haven't dawned on them that, look, I have a child and now I have a new responsibility. And so therefore, sometimes they're leaving them with grandmothers, sometimes they're leaving them with all kind of other people.
Friends, family.
Friends and all that sort of a thing, and then you end up with a problem. You can't tell me that you have a child in your house, living with you, and that child is becoming a monster in your house.
And you do not know.
And you do not know.
And it happens. It happens. And that is something that we need to definitely look at in terms of how we rear our children. And realize and looking at what we call the red flags. Knowing those red flags. Because when you expose your child to a certain lifestyle at a very young age, you're creating a monster, and you don't even know what you're creating. You, as you said, sometimes they leave them with a friend, and they go to work, or they probably go somewhere, and you don't know what exactly that person is exposing your child to. I have been in situations where I'm walking by, and I'm seeing persons that are smoking right there, with children there, acting in a particular way with young children around, and these are things that we need to be mindful of, that children at a very young age see things and they absorb it. And they grow up with that thinking that it is the norm. There could be much debate when it comes around to the use of marijuana. But we need to understand one simple thing. The human brain, if it's not properly developed and exposed to certain things, will have altering effects. So the use of marijuana around children whose brain is not fully developed will have some effects. Use of alcohol, even before what you call fetal syndrome, alcohol fetal syndrome. These are things we have to be mindful of. That when you expose yourself to certain things, it affects your children. And also when it comes around to doing proper assessment and evaluation of your child is very, very important. because you're not too sure if your child have developmental issues. You see the child act in a particular way, you're not too sure what it is, and you think it is a norm. Plus also you got to bear in mind that having your child being around so an individual, and we like to say, oh, he have his friends, or she have his friends, but you have to know who those friends are. Very, very important. You have to know who those friends are, who their parents are, who their uncles are, who their nieces are, who everybody are, because you need to know what environment your child is going into. And you find people that are pastors, and the children have become murderers because of what the child have been exposed to.
Yes.
So we need to be mindful of what we expose the young people to the children at a very young age, and it's important that at a very young age you be mindful of the things that you bring around your children and the environment that you place your child in growing up.
Yes. Mr. Connor, we are going to go to the phone lines and hear what people have to say. We'll continue our discussion, of course.
Yes.
The overseas number to call is 1718-577-2916. That is 1718-577-2916. And the local number is 465-2555. That is 465-2555. We welcome your calls. Right, Mr. Connor, one of the things that the internet is a good thing, and the internet is a bad thing. I suppose it all depends on the use of it. And there's a lack of supervision, especially with children using the internet. And everything is at their fingertips. And many of them are influenced by what they see on the internet. Just the other day and some of these video games too. People may say maybe it's not so, but just the other day I was looking at the news, I think it was CBSN, and they spoke about these young teenagers, 13 and 14, going into somebody's house, stealing gun, and then mentioning this GTA. I think you know?
Yeah,
so some of them, they really want to act out what they see in these video games.
And they become desensitized to the real effects.
And they become desensitized to the real effects. So many of them are exposed to pornography at a very young age. On the TVs and so on, I don't know if parents have parental guides or controls of what their children can watch and all of that sort of a thing. But today, almost every child has a cell phone, and I am sure there is no they have internet on it, there's no sort of restriction and so on, and they learn very early how to access inappropriate material and so on, because they're curious.
Yeah.
They want to experiment, and so they're exposed at a very young age.
We live in an age of technology, and it's something that we have to live with.
And it's
and
good.
Technology develop every second. There's something new that comes out every second, and parents and adults need to understand the online language of children. They need to understand the online language. You have SMS, smile. You have TG, thank God it's Friday. All kind of acronyms for, and these are things that that parents need to look for, because there are hidden languages being used on the internet between online predators and children, and even children across the children. For example, my mother going to sleep in the next hour, they probably have something where they're going to put in for that. Come by the back door. And those are things. Meet me this place, and you will see it and you say, well, what kind of gibberish But it's always something that is hidden within those conversations. And being able to understand what your children are doing with their online devices is very, very important.
Yeah, Mr. Connor, you know, it's we spoke about isolation before in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah. But to a large degree, sometimes what you have happening in a household is that there's isolation in the sense that there's not much communication between parent and child. And the child lives in the house, but at the very same time, the child lives in his or her room, in his or her bedroom. What is actually going on inside there?
Yes.
Does the parent take the time out to find out what is he doing locked up in this room all the time? Of course, what do you think he's doing? He has his cell phone, he has his computer, he or she, he has his games and so on. And you don't even find out
what's going on.
What's really going on. How are you doing? How was school today? Try to develop some sort of a relationship with your child. Ask them questions and things like that. And I think that is where the whole breakdown really takes place.
Sometimes some parents live with their children here. Sometimes
so the parents live with the children.
Some parents live with their children. And I'm going to be honest. Sometimes some parents live with their children, not the children living with their parents. You have some households out there where the children controls everything. They go when they want, they come when they want, they do as they like. Mommy, I need this, I need that, and that's it. And that is the reality. And when you're going to be having your household being run like that, you have lost control. I don't want to upset him. I don't want to go in his room because he's going to get angry.
Okay, I think I provided my audience with some numbers that were not correct. Those were the numbers for when we were in the radio studio. The numbers to call, pardon me, are 466-2666, 662-8674, 767-4765, and the overseas number is 1-239-645-4500. We await your call. So the local number, 466-2666, 662-8674, 767-4765, and the overseas number is 1-239-645-4500. We await your calls. Yes, Mr. Connor.
Yeah, dealing with a lot of cases that do come to the department when it comes around to delinquent children. You will find a lot of parents wait until it's too late. Too late to start trying different interventions. When it's really too late. And you find that they come to the office and they will say, I would like my child to go to New Horizon.
You know, it's harder to get the horse to come back in the stable.
Yeah.
When it has already gone through the gate.
Yes. Not saying that all is lost.
All is not lost.
But it's harder. It is harder. And sometimes you go into these situations and you say to the parent, well, you need to change certain things about you. The way in which you speak to your child.
We have a call. Working for you, good afternoon.
Mr. Williams.
Yes, good afternoon.
And good afternoon to the good gentleman there, Mr. Connor.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes. No, Mr. Connor, I am here listening to the program. And so much an interesting thing, especially about the children, the young children going to school. I hear that, Mr. Williams was saying that how some of them will traumatize and how they will feel and those things, you know. And at this point that it's COVID. And everybody know that the country in a terrible situation, the whole world, I must say, in a terrible situation. But I believe them children, me and you, and Mr. Williams, we never faced a pandemic yet. And I believe that these young children now, young people now, who go into school, they face a pandemic. So I believe that they will have something to go with and to tell the children them when they reach man and woman and start to get children, how a pandemic go. So this is something that we become like we got to live with for a while. And we know that the situation is a terrible situation right now. School are locked down, the children them can't get to function how they want to function. And I believe that the Father will work out things for us. We got to put our Father God first. And then everything come after. So, let me be strong, just keep the faith. And people go by the protocol and do what we got to do. Because it's only so we're going to get out of this. By go to the protocol and doing the right thing and go out and take the vaccine. It's important. All right then, wonderful program as usual. God bless you all.
Thank you so much.
To say something in relation to children are being home for this long period of time. Once ago when we have a break from school, it's playtime.
Yes.
You're home, you're going to be home for summer, Easter, wherever, you're taking that time to go to the bear, you swim, you go look mangoes, you go this. But bear in mind now, there's a difference where time management of these children are very important. Because in their mind, they're seeing it as time off.
Yes.
They're seeing it as time off. But we need to, and their parents need to be able to sit down and have a conversation and say, look, it is time off in a sense, but it is not time off from learning. You're going to have your time to have your fun, but you also need to be able to manage your time.
Yeah, we have another caller. Working for you, good afternoon.
Hello?
Yes.
This is Major Joseph. I want to ask Connor something.
Go ahead, sir.
Connor, this is the Major. This is the Major.
This is who?
Connor, I want to ask you something. Listen to me now, eh? I heard you saying that it appears to me that the children is ruling the mother. Do you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
As for what I want to tell you, would you, the children...
I'm not hearing you.
The mother.
We're hearing you. Go ahead.
So I want to know, I can't understand that. Would you consider that to be dealing with rejection? So they're rejecting the children, the mothers, them rejecting the children and allowing them to rule them.
Okay, what I meant with that is based upon, in some household, you find that the situation is so broken. The children are not adhering to what the parents are saying and stuff of that nature. So you find that my statement was based upon that aspect, that some parents live with their children. The children are the ones who set the tone within the home. The children decide when they go out, what time they want to come in. They want money to go to the movies. But you're not asking, so what movie you're going to see? You're going to, and going over the strip, going to different dances, and the parents are not setting the parameters, and you find that there's a breakdown, a total breakdown within the home, that the parents have just basically have lost control. And that is some of the reality of some of some homes within.
Some parents say they can't go with him or they can't go with her. What does that really mean?
And
they've lost control.
They've lost control. And you know what? One of the things, Mr. Williams, when you find that you have parents within a home that have basically lost respect for each other, and there's constant conflict, the child end up losing respect for both of them.
Yeah.
And that is what that is what happens quite often.
Because there is no example that is set.
There is no example. I remember one situation where a child tell me, my parents don't respect me, so why should I respect them? They fight in front of me all the time. They swear in front of me all the time. They ain't got no respect for me, so why should I respect them?
Example is the best teacher.
Exactly. So that is what I meant. That is what I meant when I said that sometimes the situation is so broken that the parents live with the child.
Yeah, but in those cases too, Mr. Connor, is that the home is dysfunctional and there is need for support for this home and so on. Because you can only have children who are dysfunctional coming from homes that are dysfunctional. I think we have another caller. We have a caller. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Connor.
Yes, speaking.
This is Tian Coggins from Dietbet. I don't know if you remember me. I was a student at Sandy Point High School.
Yes, Tian.
Mr. Connor, I just want to ask a question. So since we're in COVID-19 and schools are locked down and all of this sort, do we have anything in place to reach the at-risk youth that would have been part of the ministries or your department's current program? How are we still trying to get to the at-risk youths that you would have identified earlier during this current lockdown situation and during COVID with schools continuously closed? Hello?
End of law? So I didn't really get to hear the real part of what was being asked.
Could you repeat what you just said, the question?
How are we catering for at-risk youths during the current COVID circumstances, additionally the lockdown? Are mechanisms in place to be in contact with at-risk youths?
Yes, as was mentioned earlier, that each officer are still mandated to keep in contact with those individuals that they're working with, the young people that they're working with. So we're making it mandatory that we still would maintain contact with all of our cases, and we'll continue to work with with the families that are out there that the department have been working with. So we're not just sitting back and waiting for things to just fade away. Each officer is still mandated to continue their work and with less of contact, of course, because of what's going on in regards to the community spread. But each officer is still mandated to continue to provide whatever services needed. Probably it might be mentorship, helping them cope through, coping with different issues that they might be facing. Some of them probably have issues with their families that they need to address. So we are still continuing to work with these young people that the department have been working with over the period of time. So we have not gone into a lot or anything of that nature. We still are operating, and reports still can be made, and officers will still be responding in whatever shape or form that is necessary to engage the individuals that is reported to the department or we have been working with.
Okay, Mr. Connor, I wanted to ask, what is the process for admitting a juvenile into the rehabilitative center at Horizons?
Ask that question. It has been something that have been, misrepresented over a period of time. People need to remember that the center was created for juvenile offenders, persons who have committed an offense, who are serving a sentence, or persons who are on remand for a particular crime. So it's not a free-for-all where everybody goes to New Horizon once they are showing some form of delinquency, because there are systems in place to do interventions within the community, and that is why we look at diversion. So when it comes around to admittance to the center, and even if a parent come and ask for help from the department, there's certain things that we must prove to the court, because by court order that the department have done A, B, and C to ensure that whatever issues that are presented have been dealt with, or we have made attempts to do A, B, and C to counter the delinquent behavior of that child, or to fix whatever issues they have in the household. So going to New Horizon is a last resort. it is a last resort. So the department have officers that we work, we will make referral to different agencies.
We'll stick it there. We
Yes,
have
sorry.
a question. A caller. Working for you, good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello?
Good afternoon. That's working for you?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, just get cut off here. Anyway, Mr. Lesroy Williams, or whatever your name?
Yes.
Yes. And Mr. Connor.
Mr. Connor.
Yeah, Mr. Connor, I've been listening to you for quite a while, and you're very eloquent and you bring out other good facts. But sometimes these things are only on paper, you know, and in practice they're not there. But my thing is though, I don't hear you all say, advise parents, especially delinquent ones, to tell the children that they love them. And let me talk from my personal experience. I got 3 daughters, all adults, and grown people. And every time I talk with them, after we finish, they'll tell me they love me, I tell them I love them. And that has been since they were babies. So, I don't know. Some people never ever tell their children they love them, neither father nor mother. But I find that work very well for me. And I believe people should copy that and do it. Tell the children they love them. And when you read your Bible, the Bible tells you the same thing. Okay? So you all need to emphasize, I don't know how religious or how Christian you all may be, but these are facets that are, in my mind, are very, very important for the bringing up of children. Because when you tell a child you love them from beginning, they never see him to run away from it. So, that's my little input for today, because I realize the time almost up to.
Yes.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you so much. That was a great input.
And I will say to this, that we encourage at the department is to create families that are based upon certain keywords: love, empathy, respect. Those are things that forgiveness, very, very important, compassion. And you will...
Those values, children must be taught those values
at a very young age.
At a very, very young age.
Very, very young age. And that I have seen a lot of...
Tolerance for others.
I've seen a lot of...
Even who are different.
I've seen a lot of cases that and it still happens where you ask parents, when was the last time you tell your child you love them? And they be like, it's been a while. Eh? And I've seen families break down and start crying because it is so refreshing.
Yes, Mr. Connor, but I have seen, well, I don't know if it is just for St. Kitts, but it's more of a Caribbean thing, St. Kitts and Nevis, but we do not like to have displays of affection. And what? No, we don't. We will. You will probably know that somebody loves you, maybe because of what they do for you. But do they ever hear you say, "I love you"? Hearing it makes a big difference, because of course, non-verbals can be misleading.
Yes.
You never tell me you love me, but the parent might say, "But what do you think? I send you school, I give you lunch money, I buy you sneakers, I do all of this kind of a thing. What is that?
What do you think I do it for?
What do you think I'm doing it for? Ain't love I love you?" But the child needs to hear those words, because sometimes, and that is the problem, we equate those things with love.
Yeah.
We equate those things with love. And so sometimes we think buying the child the Nike and buying the child all these name brand things and so on is really sending the message that you love the child.
Making sure they're on a plane every... And it's so interesting, that during this pandemic, nobody could travel really.
Nobody can.
So sending your child to New York or Florida for summer or wherever the case may be, that is basically out of the question. And those things they equate to love, but they don't say that I love you. So
tell your child you love them. Men, tell your sons you love them. There's nothing wrong with it. Tell your daughters so too.
Yep.
And women need to tell, mothers need to tell their daughters they love them and their sons that they love them.
Kiss them.
But we are very uncomfortable with these things. We are very, very uncomfortable with these displays of affection. And I really don't know why.
Every time I come out the phone with my mother, we don't hang up until we say we love each other.
Yeah.
And that is how it's supposed to be. And parents need to start that from a very, very, very young age.
That is correct.
And it come back to what you said earlier. Creating that from a very young age.
We can't hug our children, we can't kiss them, we can't. It's just that it is something that we just have not become very comfortable with, or some of us.
Public display of affection is something that we need to understand, need to become a part of us, especially at this point in time. Because let's not wait that if we reach to that point where we can no longer see our loved one when they're going into the next world, and to tell them that.
And that is why sometimes I believe, Mr. Connor, that the first person that tells them, or they hear say, I love you, you are beautiful, they fall.
They fall. Because we view love as being a romantic thing and not being something of a display of affection by
that is correct.
Our loved ones.
That is correct. Mr. Connor, you know, we are out of time. I really would have liked to continue this discussion with you.
Yes.
That has been so interesting. Talking about these things are always interesting.
Yes.
Because, you know, at the end of the day, we have to think in terms of development of our society. There can be no development without human development.
Yes, very important. Because our people is our greatest treasure.
Our people is our greatest treasure. And in this case and in this context in which we are speaking about our children,
yes,
our children, they must be protected.
Yes.
Our children must be loved and our children must be cared for. And how we treat our children says a lot about us.
And the decisions that we make now.
And the decisions that we make now. And how we treat them and how we socialize them will tell what sort of a society we will have later on and in the future.
Yes.
And so the protection of our children during this pandemic is pretty important. Children are going through a lot of stress. They're going through a lot of anguish. There's a lot of disruption in their lives, in their education, in their social network. There's abuse taking place. There's violence happening in homes and so on that have been exacerbated, that have been heightened by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we as adults, we are the vaccine for our children.
Yes.
To protect them. And that is why it is so important that we have to take the vaccine. The protection of those among us who is most vulnerable.
And is also
and weakest.
And also for the elderly.
And the elderly as well tells us something about who we are as a society. Anything you want to say before we go?
Definitely. It's been a pleasure being here once again to share and discuss these very important topics. It is something that, you know, that the public definitely need to understand and have within the public domain open discussion about these things. And sharing of information is vital at this point in time. And ensuring that parents have the information that is needed to ensure that in this time frame they are doing what they're supposed to do to protect their children. Mm-hmm. And as I said, you know, even though we are on short hours, we are still open. We are still there to ensure that we fully engage our clients. We are still there to ensure that intakes are being done, reports are being made. So in relation to what's going on with the ministry, from our ministry end, we are basically there at 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. physically at the department. We have our contact information, which will encourage persons to use first and foremost instead of coming to the department because of the social distancing and all of that. So the contact information is basically for the administrative end, which is the permanent secretary end, is 467-1275. For the counseling unit, is 662-8086. For community development and social services, and I know that something went out in regards to school uniform, and person might need to get in contact with them to get more information of how to go about dealing with that. So their contact information is 662-5492. For gender affairs, as we spoke about the heightened increase in domestic violence and stuff of that nature, is 662-5492. That is the number for gender affairs. And for probation and child protection services is 662-6833. And to also make reports, you can also email us at PCPS, that's probation, that's PCPS reports at govkn@gmail.com. So that's PCPS reports at govkn@gmail.com. And of course, for New Horizon Juvenile Rehabilitation Center, if you have a family member there you need to get in contact with them and you do not remember the number is 467-1598. So those are the information, those are the numbers of which you can stay in contact with the department. And I say thank you very much for having me here. It's been a pleasure as usual, and I do enjoy having those discussions going forward. And there'll be a lot more of that we're going to continue discussing because there's a lot that the public need to be aware of in regards to the social protections and all of that when it comes around to children and the country as a whole.
Mr. Connor, it has been a pleasure. It is always a pleasure having you on this program to talk about such matters that really matter to us all. And I want to thank all of our callers today's program and all of our listeners. Of course, we continue to appreciate you from week to week. I also want to apologize for the 2 weeks prior to that. We were over in the radio area and we came over to the TV area. And I was wondering why it is that I had no callers in the previous 2 programs. But now I realize that I was using the numbers for the radio area that are different for the numbers over in the TV studio. And that is why I had no callers. And so I want to really apologize to those persons who listened to Working for You and who wanted to call in but were provided by the wrong numbers by me. A senior moment, I guess. Thank you very much for listening and being with us again for Working for You. Next week we will be back. I am Lesroy Williams.